The 1950s were more than just a decade. They were a way of life, a rhythm that carried families through days filled with routine, community, and simple joys. It was a time when front porches were gathering places, when the sound of a screen door slamming shut felt like summer itself, and when neighbors knew not only your name, but your children's names too. America was growing fast, yet life felt slower, more personal. From black and white televisions glowing in living rooms to the steady hum of radios filling kitchens, every detail of the 1950s carried its own story. These weren't just years gone by, they were memories etched into the daily fabric of a simpler world. Today, let's step back into that world, into the moments that defined an era, and revisit the everyday joys of the 1950s. The day often began with the familiar rattle of glass milk bottles being placed at the doorstep. The milkman's truck rolled slowly down quiet streets, and children would hurry to grab the cold bottles before breakfast. The newspaper boy, riding a sturdy bicycle, tossed folded papers onto porches with practiced ease, sometimes landing them perfectly on the welcome mat. Kitchens smelled of bacon sizzling in cast-iron skillets, and percolators bubbled with fresh coffee. Families gathered at the breakfast table, not in a rush, but ready to start the day together. For children, mornings meant buttoning up starched shirts, tying shoelaces tight, and packing metal lunchboxes decorated with cowboys, space heroes, or favorite TV characters. Yellow pencils and crisp notebooks slid into satchels as mothers reminded kids not to forget their homework. Walking or biking to school, children passed tree-lined streets where every house seemed to carry the same rhythm: a flag on the porch, a radio playing softly inside, and neighbors waving from their yards. The hum of everyday life carried through neighborhoods. Screen doors creaked open and slammed shut with the sound that became part of summer itself. Clotheslines stretched across backyards, filled with flapping sheets and shirts drying in the sun. Radios played from kitchen windows, carrying the latest tunes or baseball games, while dogs barked at passing bicycles and the occasional ice cream truck. For parents, daily errands meant walking to small corner stores where grocers knew every customer by name. Shelves weren't endless, but choices were trusted. Fresh bread wrapped in wax paper, jars of candy that children gazed at with wide eyes, and neatly arranged fruits displayed outside. Shopping carts were light, purchases simple, and there was always time for a friendly conversation at the register. As the day slowed, families returned to a familiar pattern. Fathers arrived home from work carrying lunch pails, mothers stirred pots in warm kitchens, and children rushed to finish chores before supper. Evening meals weren't hurried, they were events. Dinners were shared around wooden tables with mashed potatoes, roasted chicken or meatloaf, and always a jug of cold milk. Afterward, dishes clattered in sinks, while children sprawled on living room rugs, waiting for favorite radio programs or the latest episode flickering across the television. What made the 1950s unforgettable wasn't just the big events, but the small, ordinary joys: the smell of fresh-cut grass, the sound of roller skates on sidewalks, or the thrill of a new comic book bought with a dime. Life was built from these tiny threads, woven into days that may have seemed ordinary at the time, but became timeless in memory. Life inside a 1950s home carried a rhythm that was both predictable and comforting. The world outside might have been changing rapidly: highways stretching across the nation, television becoming a household treasure, and suburbs growing faster than ever. But inside the walls of a family home, life felt steady and familiar. Every detail, from the furniture to the family traditions, painted a picture of warmth and belonging. The kitchen was the true heart of a 1950s house. Bright linoleum floors shone in patterns of red, yellow, or checkerboard black and white. Chrome-trimmed tables with formica tops reflected the light of hanging lamps, and vinyl chairs squeaked softly when pulled out. Appliances were both functional and fashionable. Pastel-colored refrigerators in shades of turquoise, pale pink, or butter yellow, and ovens that promised the magic of modern cooking. Mothers, often dressed in pressed house dresses or aprons, moved with practiced ease, turning simple ingredients into hearty meals. The smell of pot roast or chicken and dumplings filled the air, mingling with the sweet scent of pies cooling on window sills. For children, nothing compared to the sound of the cookie jar lid being lifted, followed by the crunch of fresh-baked treats. Evenings brought families together around the dining table, a ritual that rarely wavered. There were no smartphones or constant distractions. Instead, dinner was a moment of connection. Fathers, tired from long days at factories, offices, or shops, shared stories, while mothers asked about schoolwork and chores. Dishes like meatloaf, mashed potatoes with gravy, string beans, and Jell-O salads were staples. Milk was poured into tall glasses, and bread rolls were passed around with butter. Conversations flowed, sometimes lighthearted, sometimes serious, but always a reminder that this was a family unit bound tightly together. After meals, dishes were washed by hand, often by children under the watchful eye of their mother, while radios played softly in the background. The living room was where families truly gathered after long days. Couches and armchairs, often upholstered in floral prints or textured fabrics, faced a central piece of furniture that became the pride of the decade, the television set. Before TV, radios had commanded the room, their glowing dials filling the air with baseball games, variety shows, and news reports. But now the black and white screen flickered with magic. Families laughed together at I Love Lucy, marveled at westerns, or watched variety shows hosted by familiar faces. Children sprawled across braided rugs on the floor, their eyes wide with wonder, while parents relaxed nearby. Lamps cast warm pools of light, and coffee tables held bowls of peanuts or candy. Every evening felt like a small celebration of togetherness. Upstairs, bedrooms carried the quiet charm of simpler times. Boys' rooms often featured model airplanes hanging from the ceiling, baseball gloves tossed onto chairs, and stacks of comic books piled beside the bed. Girls' rooms displayed dolls carefully arranged on shelves, vanity tables with hairbrushes and mirrors, and quilts stitched by grandmothers draped across beds. Twin beds with matching headboards were common, and bedtime routines were strict but reassuring. Children brushed their teeth, said their prayers, and tucked themselves in while parents checked in one last time. The soft hum of a fan in the summer or the ticking of a bedside clock were the lullabies that carried them to sleep. Outside the home, porches and backyards extended the family space. A front porch with rocking chairs or a porch swing was a place where neighbors stopped by, where gossip was shared, and where summer nights stretched long with laughter. In backyards, clotheslines stretched across the grass, filled with laundry swaying in the breeze. Barbecue grills, a rising trend in the 50s, smoked with burgers and hot dogs on weekends. Children played tag or caught fireflies in jars, their laughter filling the twilight. Every backyard seemed to echo with life, not with screens or gadgets, but with voices, footsteps, and imagination. The essence of home life in the 1950s was not luxury, but connection. Families lived by a rhythm that balanced work, school, and leisure. Chores were shared, meals were sacred, and time together was valued more than anything money could buy. Looking back, these homes may appear modest compared to today's sprawling houses filled with modern technology, but what they lacked in size, they made up for in warmth. A 1950s home wasn't just a place to live, it was a sanctuary of belonging, where every corner, Every smell, every sound carried a memory worth keeping. Entertainment in the 1950s wasn't about endless screens in our pockets or streaming at the push of a button. It was slower, more deliberate, and yet somehow more magical. People didn't just consume entertainment, they experienced it, often together in living rooms, drive-ins, or neighborhood diners. These shared moments became memories that lingered for a lifetime. In towns and cities alike, diners and soda fountains were the heart of social life. Stainless steel counters, spinning stools, and glass cases of pies invited customers inside. Teenagers crowded into booths, sipping cherry colas and milkshakes through striped paper straws, while jukeboxes in the corner filled the room with the latest hits from Elvis Presley or Buddy Holly. Waitresses in crisp uniforms balanced trays of burgers and fries, moving gracefully between tables. For many, soda fountains weren't just about the food, they were about being seen, laughing with friends, and feeling part of the vibrant rhythm of youth culture. Music pulsed through the decade, and jukeboxes were at the center of it. With just a nickel, the click of buttons sent records spinning, and soon the room came alive with rhythm and melody. Teenagers danced in sock hops held in school gyms, their saddle shoes sliding across polished floors as records played the newest rock and roll tunes. Dance halls echoed with laughter, shouts, and the thrill of being young in a world where music was changing everything. For many, these dances were the first steps toward independence, toward friendships and romances that felt larger than life. By the mid-1950s, televisions had begun to replace radios as the centerpiece of entertainment at home. Families gathered around black and white screens, adjusting rabbit ear antennas to catch their favorite shows. I Love Lucy had the nation laughing. The Honeymooners brought working-class humor, and westerns like Gunsmoke transported audiences into dusty frontiers. Unlike today, when every person retreats to their own screen, television in the 50s was communal. Everyone leaned in close, sharing the same flickering images, the same laughter, and the same suspense as commercials promised everything from soap to breakfast cereals. Leisure didn't always require leaving the house. Families and friends often gathered around tables for board games like Monopoly, Scrabble, or Clue. The clatter of dice, the shuffle of cards, and the sound of playful arguments filled kitchens late into the night. Card nights were especially common among adults. Poker or bridge played with neighbors over bowls of pretzels and glasses of soda or beer. These nights weren't about competition as much as they were about companionship, laughter, and sharing time together. Seasonal fairs and small amusement parks offered another kind of joy. Brightly painted carousels, Ferris wheels glowing at dusk, and cotton candy stands brought children wide-eyed delight. Traveling carnivals set up in empty fields, offering games of chance, popcorn, and the smell of hot corn dogs. For many children, clutching a balloon while riding a carousel horse was the highlight of the summer. These events weren't grand by today's standards, but they filled hearts with wonder and became treasured chapters of childhood. What made 1950s entertainment so unforgettable wasn't just the activities themselves, but the togetherness they encouraged. Whether it was a family huddled around a TV, teenagers laughing at the diner counter, or entire towns turning out for fairs, leisure was always shared. Entertainment was less about distraction and more about connection, about finding joy in music, movies, games, and company. In these moments, the 1950s felt alive with possibility, a decade humming with laughter and the sounds of a simpler, more connected world. The 1950s were a decade of style, not just clothing, but attitude. Fashion told stories about who you were, where you belonged, and even what you dreamed of becoming. From schoolyards to dance halls, every piece of clothing, every hairstyle, every fad seemed to capture the spirit of the times. Most men of the 1950s began their mornings by slipping into neatly pressed slacks, button-down shirts, and polished shoes. A tie was not just for the office. Many wore them as a daily staple, reflecting pride in appearance. Women often dressed in modest skirts that brushed the calf, paired with blouses or sweater sets, and almost always completed the look with stockings and sensible heels. At home, house dresses and aprons became uniforms for mothers, practical yet patterned with cheerful prints. Even casual clothing carried a sense of polish, with very little left to chance. For the first time in American history, teenagers began to set their own style apart from adults. Young men admired the rebellious look of James Dean, cuffed blue jeans, white t-shirts, and leather jackets. Girls gravitated toward poodle skirts, cinched waists, and cardigans, often decorated with whimsical appliques. Saddle shoes, with their two-tone design, became nearly universal among high schoolers, worn with bobby socks that girls rolled just so. These fashions weren't just clothing, they were badges of youth, symbols of belonging to a generation that was beginning to shape its own identity. Hair was just as iconic as clothing. Men slicked back their hair with pomade, creating sharp, polished looks, or the wavy ducktail style that became the signature of cool. Barbershops buzzed with clippers, offering clean crew cuts to boys whose parents favored neatness. Women set their hair in rollers at night, creating soft waves or short, carefully styled curls by morning. Younger women often tied ponytails with bright ribbons, while older women favored elegant updos. Hairstyles weren't just personal choices, they were statements of order, charm, and for some, a touch of rebellion.